Will Xi rule for life? China's parliament is set to change the constitution so Xi Jinping can be president as long as he wants. The reason? Protecting the authority of the Communist Party. But will that convince anyone in China or anywhere else? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammad Jamjoom. The Communist Party has governed China for decades, and President Xi Jinping could become the leader serving Chinese people for years to come. The two-term limit on a president's rule is about to end. China's National People's Congress is expected to amend the constitution to allow the president to take the job beyond 10 years. The limit was meant to ensure there was no repeat of the Mao Zedong era. We will get to our guests in a moment, but first, Adrian Brown reports from Beijing.
Tiananmen Square has been the setting for some of the most defining moments in recent Chinese history, not all of them peaceful. Now a new political drama is unfolding. This carefully choreographed gathering involves almost 3,000 delegates and almost as many journalists. Like Parliament, the media in China is controlled by the party, offering uniform coverage. The National People's Congress normally lasts for 10 days, but this year it's being extended by 5 days, possibly to give delegates more time to discuss proposed changes to China's constitution, which could mean Xi Jinping being president for life. The issue is overshadowing this Congress, but most delegates we spoke to didn't want to talk about it. I don't want to discuss it. Ask them, he said. And no comment from him either. Party discipline, though, will ensure the amendment is passed.
Those capable people should stay in their posts as long as possible.
The decision is made by the party. As a delegate, I fully support it.
The decisions made here will affect almost a fifth of humanity. Premier Li Keqiang presented his annual work report with his boss seated just a few rows behind him. He said the Communist Party, not the country, had faced an extremely complex environment both at home and abroad. In his 45-page address, he mentioned Xi Jinping 18 times.
We will rally even closer around the party central committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core. Hold high the banner of socialism with Chinese characteristics, and follow the guideline Xi Jinping sought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era.
The Premier presented a vision of a vibrant, growing economy, but in language often reminiscent of the Mao era. And there was one overriding message: China will be great again, so long as Xi Jinping's at the helm. Adrian Brown, Al Jazeera, Beijing.
Now we have a look at Xi Jinping's rise to power and policies. Xi Jinping was born in 1953 to a Communist Party leader, but his life took a dramatic turn when his father was purged as part of Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution. At age 15, Xi was deprived of his privileged upbringing and sent to work on a farm. But he managed to join the Communist Party and worked his way up the ranks, until in 2013 he was elected president of China. Last year, his name and philosophy were added to the party constitution. Since coming to power, Xi has waged an anti-corruption campaign and launched an economic reform plan, including the One Belt, One Road trade project. He's also asserted China's territorial claims in the South China Sea. Xi has been criticized for human rights violations and clampdowns on freedoms. The People's Republic of China was established in 1949 by the ruling Communist Party. Here's a look at some of its leaders. Mao Zedong is the founder of the republic, known as China's leader for life, who stayed in office for nearly 3 decades until his death. During his rule, millions died in his Great Leap Forward and Cultural Revolution campaigns aimed at preserving communist ideology. Deng Xiaoping was the first to rule out the leadership as a lifelong job. He also spearheaded reform, but is remembered for using force against pro-democracy protesters in Tiananmen Square. Hu Jintao, Xi's predecessor, didn't hold on to power long, serving 2 terms for 10 years during which China's economy grew to become the second largest in the world. All right, let's bring in our guests. Joining us in Beijing, we have Victor Gao, director of the China National Association of International Studies. In Hong Kong, political scientist Joseph Cheng, a convener for the Alliance for True Democracy. And in Canterbury in the UK, via Skype, Carrie Brown, author of CEO China, The Rise of Xi Jinping. Welcome to all of you. Victor, I want to start with you. Just how significant a move is it abolishing term limits in China?
This is one of the most important proposed amendments to the Chinese Constitution made by the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China. And I'm sure the NPC will have this amendment adopted. Once it is adopted, it will ensure that the incumbent president, Xi Jinping, will continue to serve as the Chinese president for more than 2 terms, that is 10 years. How long he will continue to serve after the originally 2-term limitation, we do not know. He may serve for years, or he may serve even for another couple of decades. This will help ensure the stability at the very top echelon of the Chinese leadership, and I think it is a good thing for China. It is a good thing for the world. The reaction of the Wall Street on the immediate reaction to this announcement indicated that even the Wall Street was positive about the longer-term stability at the very top of the Chinese leadership.
Joseph, is there any chance at this point that this would not happen? And also, what are your thoughts on abolishing term limits in China?
I agree that the National People's Congress will definitely adopt what the party has decided. But unfortunately, we believe that this is a very serious step backward. We may forget about Western values and Western systems. In fact, they have become a taboo in China in recent years. This is actually a step backwards, even in the eyes of the past Chinese party leadership. In the early 1980s, Deng Xiaoping and other Chinese elderly leaders introduced certain principles and concepts such as limits on life tenure, rejection of life tenure, limit on terms, emphasis on collective responsibility, and so on. Now all these principles are being rejected. And as we all know, concentrating power in the hands of one person is highly, highly unstable. I do not see any votes of confidence from the Wall Street or from the stock markets all over the world. I do believe that people in China more or less accept this arrangement because they do value stability and prosperity. But at the same time, we detect a lot of resentment among the Chinese intelligentsia, which explains the heavy censorship of the internet in the recent days.
Carrie, you heard Joseph there talk about China in the 1980s under the rule of Deng Xiaoping. Of course, in 1982, term limits were added to the Constitution. How do we get to a point now that in 2018, term limits can be abolished? And how exactly was Xi Jinping able to consolidate his power to such a degree at this point?
So the presidency is not the powerful position. That's the party secretaryship, and there were never any time limits on party secretaries. There were unspoken age limits. So the presidency is a sort of formal position. Of course, since the time of Jiang Zemin, it's been occupied by the person who happens to be most of the time the party secretary. So it's part of this suite of powers, along with the chairmanship of the military commission, which we say are the sort of, the trinity of powers at the top of the Chinese system. I mean, the issue really about what's happening now is it kind of undercuts the narrative of the party institutionalizing its powers and becoming itself, kind of an institution which is predictable and run according to well-established and understood laws. And this is a sort of, in a sense, giving more weight to those who believe that we're looking at quite an autocratic leadership. I don't think we can say we're looking at an autocratic leadership at the moment because it's really establishing an intention. But of course, that intention won't be fully known until the presidency, the current term, ends in 2023. And I mean, many things can change since then. I suppose the final thing I'd say is, you can hoard these titles when the going is good. In China at the moment, it's going well. But the problem is when things are more difficult, and historically things have become more difficult after a good period for China, then everyone is going to be looking at Xi Jinping and saying, well, you're the one who said you have all the answers. Can you give us answers now? It's quite an exposed position. In that sense, it could be quite destabilizing. At the moment, though, yes, I mean, it seems to be consolidating and quite empowering.
Victor, President Xi says that his political philosophy is going to help build a modern, prosperous China. Of course, his name and his political philosophy have been enshrined in the Constitution, in the Communist Constitution. What exactly is that political philosophy, though?
No, I think what President Xi Jinping means is that China need to have greater democracy, and Chinese government need to have greater transparency and accountability, and people's participation in government affairs as supervisors, for example, or as commentators, etc., need to be strengthened. I think the People's Republic should be for the people, of the people, and by the people, and the Communist Party of China is their representative. And as far as the parliament is concerned, there is the National People's Congress. The delegates are elected to the National People's Congress, and they are in very important positions to legislate and to supervise the government matters. And I think, according to this vision, the Communist Party of China need to be more disciplined. They need to fight against corruption. They need to weed out the corrupt elements within the party. They need to be more responsible to serve the fundamental interests of the people. And I think in this way, the Chinese government, the Chinese party will be modernized, and they can be more effective in reflecting the desires of the people and to take actions to reflect the realities on the ground in China. And I think this is the direction where the party here in China and the government are moving forward in the coming years and coming decades.
Joseph, is there any effective opposition in China right now to Xi Jinping, or has he been able to outmaneuver and sideline any potential threat?
I do not believe any particular leader or any particular faction are in a position to challenge Xi Jinping at the moment. Although, as Kerry also indicated, because power is so much so concentrated in the hands of one person, it may easily generate resentment among various leaders, various vested interests, and so on. And when serious policy setback occurs, people may then blame Xi Jinping because he assumes responsibility for all important matters. And that also explains why the Chinese leadership today is quite conscious, quite aware of the danger of any financial crisis. At the same time, we have to understand the limit of any dictatorship in a modern system like that of China. You see, the party, for example, has been asking cadres of all ranks to declare their assets, to declare foreign passports held by their family members, and so on. And we see tremendous resistance. And in fact, this simple demand has not been met. And you can see the effectiveness of the party when it goes against vested interests.
Kerry, we're talking a lot about the politics here, but how do ordinary Chinese people see the rise of Xi Jinping? And do they see potential parallels between President Xi and former Chairman Mao?
So, I mean, on the perceptions of Xi Jinping, of course, it's difficult because there aren't wide opinion polls. I mean, it's sort of hard to really read, but online you can see that the message of China going towards the centenary goal of being a powerful, strong country in 2021, centenary of the anniversary of the Communist Party's foundation. You know, Chinese people want their country to be strong and have good status. And Xi Jinping being the spokesperson for that message, that's popular. I mean, he is popular because the message is popular, and it's a nationalistic message, but it is a message about China having its justice, you know, the just moment of its renaissance after a tough, you know, modern history restored. So there, you know, he is on, I think, secure ground. For most people, though, it will not help that they have a perpetual president if their living standards are impacted. This is not the time of Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong was almost autonomous from the Communist Party. He was able, in the Cultural Revolution, to attack the Communist Party, rather strangely, 50 years ago. Well, Xi Jinping is the servant of the party and is sort of fitting into the party structures, even if he's in some way sort of molding them to his own political program. That's got to fit within the party philosophy. And for most people, they will be worried about the issues of, kind of a good quality growth, a good quality living environment, a good quality, kind of jobs for the children that they are spending a lot of money on educating. These bread and butter issues are the same in China as they are everywhere. And if failure to really address those, because China does have huge kind of challenges, it will be very, very serious. We shouldn't be complacent about the condition of China. We see a confident, strong leadership now, and that's good because the world has got enough instability in it. This is, kind of at the moment looks stable, but China's significant issues in terms of its economic structure, its environment, its kind of inequalities, these have not gone away, and making a president perpetual is not going to make them go away. In fact, it may well make people say, well, you look so powerful, why can't you solve these problems? That's not happening now, but it could happen in the future.
Victor, critics of Xi Jinping charge that his anti-corruption drive has been just a way for him to consolidate more power. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think corruption in China is deeply entrenched and is permeating into all corners of the system, within the party, within the government. And if fight against corruption is not relentless, the Communist Party of China will collapse, and the People's Republic of China, as we know it, may collapse. That's why fighting against corruption is absolutely about the life and the death of the party and the People's Republic. And I think President Xi Jinping has won tremendous amount of support and trust from the party members and from the people in general for his relentlessness in fighting against the corruption, not only weeding out corrupt officials, but also come up with more systematic arrangement to ensure that corruption will not be repeated again in the future. And once it is repeated, it will be detected in a timely way and will be punished accordingly. And I don't think using corruption, fighting against the corruption as a tool to promote his own agenda is the point. I think the fundamental reason why this time this constitutional amendment to abolish the two-term limitation of the presidency has been made and most likely will be adopted truly reflects the tremendous amount of goodwill and support among the party members, among the people, for what effective and outstanding leader President Xi Jinping has demonstrated himself. And also, if you compare him with his peers in other countries on the global stage, I don't think it is difficult to reach the conclusion that President Xi Jinping is generally ranked as one most effective and outstanding global leaders for his commitment to free trade, for his commitment to globalization, for his initiation of the One Belt, One Road initiative, for his very effective way of organizing the establishment of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, for example, and for his continued push for China to become more integrated with the rest of the world. The record speaks for itself, so the rest of the world should not be surprised that Xi Jinping is expected to serve longer than 10 years.
Joseph, how concerning is all of this to the Asia-Pacific region specifically?
Well, I do believe that most Asian Pacific countries now see China as a very important economic partner. But even Chinese leaders, and especially Chinese think tanks, admit that a lot of Asian countries, while they side with China in economic matters, they are also quite eager to use the United States as a military balance against Chinese influence. So they are adopting all types of hedging strategies vis-a-vis China. And certainly there is a lot of interest in the One Belt, One Road initiatives, and China's eagerness to achieve in these projects, to conclude projects, may well be seen as a weakness and has been exploited by governments. And it is quite obvious that very often change of governments would also mean termination of contracts, renegotiation of contracts, and so on. And it has been reported that almost up to 1/3 of the contracts concluded within the framework of these One Belt, One Road initiatives have already been cancelled. And renegotiations and abandonment have been very costly.
Carrie, the U.S. sees China as failing at reining in North Korea. Are there particular areas where President Xi's leadership have been at fault?
Well, I mean, I think that the President Xi, like his predecessors, Hu Jintao and Jiang Zemin, have really wanted to maintain the status quo because there's no easy outcome at the moment. North Korea has nuclearized, and all of the kind of scenarios of a unified peninsula, probably under US kind of influence, or a kind of collapsed state with all of the issues that would give rise to for China, means in a sense it's stuck really trying to just preserve what's kind of the condition at the moment, which is instability but manageable. Since the Olympics in South Korea last month, North Korea has made some kind of more placatory kind of language and seems to be reaching out, and I think China's supportive of that. What we've really seen though is a China with an issue where it really has a kind of big stake. It has a treaty alliance, after all, from 1961 with North Korea of mutual defense. It seems to be often incapable of really sounding and acting as big as maybe we expect it to. I think under Trump, we've also seen a lot of instability, so China has had to kind of maybe respond in a very different way. I think it isn't likely that China's going to want to sort of have a very radical resolution to this issue, which means that it's going to be dealing with a lot of unpredictability. It's going to continue preserving the status quo. Whether that means that the regent Kim Jong-un will be coming to Beijing, or even that Xi Jinping, as he hasn't so far, will go to Pyongyang, that's something we can kind of watch with great interest. But at the moment, it is preserving the status quo.
Victor, does all this push China now towards a more authoritarian and militarized leadership?
No, I don't think so. I think China has reached such a level of development. More and more people are in the middle class. More and more people are better educated. And every year, more than 100 million people travel abroad to see all parts of the world. So they are becoming more and more sophisticated. Of course, they want to have stability. They want to have continued improvement of their living standards. They want to be increasingly part of the world. And this is exactly what the Chinese government is trying its best to do. And this is also why President Xi Jinping has been relentless over the past 5 years to do his best. He's traveled to everywhere in China. He's meeting with people of all walks of life in China, is promoting this grand national dream, the Chinese dream, for example, the final revitalization of China and China becoming part of the world and the common destiny of mankind. And I think this does not mean that China will ever tolerate another authoritarian or totalitarian ruler.
Victor,
we need to have more transparency, more accountability, more openness.
Victor,
Yes.
I'm sorry to cut you off, just that we're almost out of time, and I want to get one more question into Joseph. Joseph, how does all this affect the pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong? And very quickly, please, because we're almost out of time.
We see this as an indication that Beijing will continue its hardline policy towards Hong Kong. There's no tolerance of the pro-democracy movement, and it is feeling rather uncomfortable about Hong Kong because Hong Kong happens to be the major source of criticisms against the Chinese party regime.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all our guests, Victor Gao, Joseph Ching, and Carrie Brown. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mohammed Jamjoom, and the whole team here, bye for now.